The day the letter arrived, my world shattered. Sealed with the crest of the formidable House Blackwood, its words were a death sentence to my freedom. I, Alara of Housethorn, was to be married to Lord Alistair Blackwood, a man I'd never met, a man whose name was whispered in fearful tones across the kingdom. Our families, once bitter rivals, had brokered a peace, and I was the price. My father, his face a mask of regret, couldn't meet my eyes. He spoke of duty, of uniting our lands, of ending a century of bloodshed. But all I heard was the clanging of a cage door. I arrived at Blackwood Manor under a sky the color of slate. The castle loomed, a jagged silhouette against the clouds, more fortress than home. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage of bone. I expected to be met with coldness, with a husband who saw me as nothing more than a political pawn. And when Lord Alistair Blackwood finally appeared, his tall, imposing figure, and the stern set of his jaw, did little to soothe my fears. He was handsome, I couldn't deny it, with eyes the color of a stormy sea, but there was a distance in them, a guardedness that mirrored my own. Our wedding was a quiet, sombre affair. I spoke my vows in a voice that was barely a whisper, my hands trembling as he placed the cold, heavy ring on my finger. That night, I lay rigid in the enormous bed, expecting him to claim his husbandly rights. Instead, he simply placed a second pillow between us. "You are my wife, Ilara," he said, his voice surprisingly gentle, "but you are also a stranger in a new home. I will not cause you further distress. This side of the bed is yours. I will not cross this line until you invite me to." I was stunned into silence. This was not the brute I had imagined. The days that followed were a strange dance of distance and tentative curiosity. Alistair was a man of routine and quiet authority. He managed his vast estate with a firm but fair hand, and his people, I noticed, didn't fear him. They respected him. He would rise at dawn, spend his mornings in his study or riding the estate, and his afternoons overseeing the training of his knights. He always joined me for dinner, a silent meal that was at first painfully awkward. I built my walls high, offering only clipped, polite responses to his attempts at conversation. I was a prisoner, I reminded myself, and he was my jailer. But my jailer was kind. He noticed I shivered in the drafty halls and had the fireplaces lit, day and night. He saw me staring longingly at the castle library and gave me a key of my own. "It is yours to use as you wish," he told me. "My mother found great solace among these books. Perhaps you will, too." One afternoon, I found him in the gardens, tending to a patch of wilted roses. His large, calloused hands that could expertly wield a sword, were surprisingly gentle as he pruned the dead leaves. "They were my mother's," he explained, noticing my presence. "I'm not much of a gardener, but I try to keep them alive for her." He looked up at me, and for the first time, the storm in his eyes seemed to calm, revealing a deep, aching sadness. She loved this garden. She would say that even the most damaged things can bloom again with a little care. His words struck a chord deep within me. Was he talking about the roses? Or was he talking about us? About our two broken houses? About two strangers forced into a life together? I felt the first crack appear in the icy wall around my heart. That evening at dinner, I didn't wait for him to speak first. I asked him about his mother, and as he spoke of her warmth, her wisdom, and her love for stories, I saw not a fearsome lord, but a son who missed his mother dearly. The turning point came during the harvest festival. The entire village was celebrating, and Alistair, as their lord, was expected to attend. He invited me to join him, but I refused, preferring the solitude of the castle. Hours later, a storm rolled in, fierce and sudden. Thunder rattled the castle windows, and lightning split the sky. I'd always been terrified of storms. I huddled in my room, trying to block out the noise, when the door opened. It was Alistair, his clothes soaked from the rain. "I heard the thunder," he said, his voice soft with concern. "I thought you might be frightened." He didn't mock me or dismiss my fear. He simply sat in a chair across the room, talking to me in a low, steady voice, telling me stories of his childhood, of learning to sword fight, of sneaking sweets from the castle kitchens. He stayed until the storm passed, a quiet, reassuring presence in the dark. And in that moment, I realized I wasn't his prisoner. I was his wife, and he was my protector. That night, after he had returned to his own chambers, I found myself staring at the pillow that lay between us on the bed. It was a barrier I had been grateful for, a line he had never once tried to cross. But now, it felt less like a boundary of safety and more like a chasm, separating me from a man I was beginning to know, a man I was beginning to care for. With a trembling hand, I reached out and moved the pillow, placing it beside my own. When Alistair came to bed later, he stopped, his eyes fixed on the empty space. I held my breath. He looked at me, a question in his gaze, and I gave him a small, hesitant nod. He walked to the bed, and this time there was no line between us. He didn't speak, but his actions said everything. He gently took my hand, his touch warm and sure, a silent promise of a new beginning. From that day on, everything changed. The silence between us was replaced with conversation, then with laughter. We discovered a shared love for ancient history and a competitive streak when it came to chess. He taught me how to shoot a bow, his arms around me to guide my aim, his breath warm against my ear. I, in turn, showed him the constellations my father had taught me, pointing them out from the battlements on clear nights. The fortress that was once my prison slowly became my home. His people became my people, and I found my place not as a political prize, but as the Lady of Blackwood, respected and cherished. I learned that Alistair's stern exterior was a shield, forged in a lonely childhood after his mother's passing and the heavy weight of his responsibilities. Behind it was a man of incredible warmth, integrity, and profound kindness. The marriage that began as a sentence became my salvation. He didn't just unite our lands, he united our hearts. I was forced to marry a stranger. But that stranger, with his quiet patience and unwavering kindness, broke down every wall I had ever built and showed me what it truly meant to love and be loved in return. Our story wasn't a fairy tale of love at first sight, but something far more real and precious. A love that bloomed in the most unexpected of gardens, proving that even the most damaged things can with a little care bloom more beautifully than ever. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to follow for more stories.